Hello, I'm in a different location here in my room. Yeah, I don't know what underwent that decision, that production decision, but regardless, hopefully the content will be none the different. Today I wanted to talk a bit about the issue of the relative scarcity between Bitcoin and fiat currencies like dollars, pounds, and yens to really sort of give people the intuitions of what underlies the one of the central value propositions of Bitcoin as a superior form of money in comparison to your dollars, your yens, and your pounds. And I guess it's sort of to kick off this discussion, we should probably think about how are our dollars, pounds, and yens created? Where do they come from? We use them for so many transactions in our day-to-day lives. We're paid in them for our work and whatnot, but very rarely do we seriously give thoughts to, well, where does this thing come from? Why? What is its origin story? How has it come into existence? And even in economics as well, this central lesson, which you think, would be, taught in clear and unambiguous detail, it's not really taught that much, which is peculiar. You would think that the central question of what is money, where does it come from, would be, hammered down your throats, but it really isn't. And I think this is why so many economists are extremely confused when it comes to the nature of Bitcoin as to why would anyone want to buy this thing? Why would they want to participate in a monetary ledger that is not issued by a central authority? Why would they want an asset without a central issuer? And, I'll tell you why. Because they don't want a form of money that can be debased. And unfortunately, with our dollars and our pounds and our yens and every other fiat currency, they consistently get debased. They consistently have their supply increased by insiders. And, and I think, this sounds tinfoil hat, this sounds conspiratorial, but it really isn't. It's just most money, most of your dollars, your pounds, they are lent into existence by central banks and commercial banks out of thin air, without any physical backing, without any sort of they are lent into existence by these centralized authorities who we trust. But unfortunately, our trust, well, is being and has been repeatedly broken. Monetary debasement isn't a new phenomena. It's something that's occurred throughout history. And I think a way we can think about this is that when there is an incentive and an opportunity for debasement with a form of money, there will be. There always will be. Eventually there will be. Even if, they do not debase the money by that much, maybe they only inflate it by 2 or 3% a year, it's that's still, leakage from your savings, And, when we think about inflation, particularly people in more Western developed countries, we may not have very strong intuitions for the corrosive impacts that inflation can have on the society, simply because, the slow and steady inflation is, so subtle as to make it sort of imperceptible, so it isn't immediately obvious. But if you're living in a developing country, for example, where the rate of debasement is much more obvious, where you're having your savings sort of sliced in half in a year, and it becomes extremely obvious why this is a problem, and I guess sort of like a basic way we can think about this is that with fiat currencies, the boundary, the limit of how many can be produced is unlimited. They can always be produced more, because particularly nowadays, you don't need to print it anymore. It's all digital. It's all electronic ledgers. So the central bank will simply just input some digits, and whoa, we've created money, and then we can lend this to your government to fund your deficit now, and it's ridiculous, really, and it's a pernicious betrayal of trust, and so many people who are paid in this money, they're not aware of it. They're not aware that they are earning money. They're earning their their work rewards when they work and get paid in this thing. They don't understand that it is sort of rigged against you. Your money is inherently designed to erode over time, and particularly for lower income earners, poor people, people who are not sort of economically and financially educated, they're much more likely to store their purchasing power in cash, and so they are sort of the most vulnerable to this, this pretty regressive and inequality increasing form of money. People who are much wealthier, they understand inflation probably much more, and they can thereby sort of, allocate their money and wealth in such a way to hedge against inflation. And that's why instead of holding cash, they'll tend to hold their money in the form of real estate, stocks, and other assets. And but this, I apologise for the construction noise outside. Hope that isn't too distracting. I might move my phone. I don't know, it's probably not going to change the audio anyway. But yeah, I think it's fucking annoying. I should really do this outside, but I'm already 7 minutes in. Fuck's sake. I'm distracted now. But like, can you think of a more annoying sound than that? But yeah, and I think when we have a monetary system that can be inflated at will by insiders, thereby, eroding your purchasing power, your ability to store value across time, people will look for other stuff to store their monetary energy in, and this becomes houses, stocks, and other financial instruments. But particularly in the case of housing, we see more and more increasingly that housing become less a sort of a sort of a basic expectation of living in society. It's become more a speculative investment asset for people to make money on, and this bids up the prices of them, and essentially, sorry, there was a 10% battery. I'm going to plug my charger back in. But this bids up the price of housing and prices out most people in society, so they can no longer afford a house, they can no longer afford to rent a house, and it's a terrible state of affairs, really, and like I said, like in the past videos, particularly about how fiat money that can be inflated at will by bankers, how that affects people's time preferences, and time preferences essentially like, how do you value present consumption versus future consumption, and how do you delay gratification? And we can think about how, okay, if you have a money that is inflating 10%, 50%, every year, that the money you have now the most that you're going to be able to use it for, the most that you're going to be able to buy is in the immediate present, right? And if you're trying to buy stuff, plan for stuff in the future, you can't, because your money's being eroded. So I guess sort of at a very basic and fundamental point, money that is leaking energy all the time, it cripples a civilization's ability to plan and organise production into the future. And this is really deep and fundamental, really. And So I guess sort of like in that context, you know, why is Bitcoin a powerful technological solution to this? And you know, if I'm going to sort of like hash out some broad fundamental aspects of why it's a solution, its absolute scarcity is one. We know for a fact that there will never be more than 21 million coins that will be mined into existence, and this is because there are transparent production rules and protocols that all the different participants, the node runners, they all reach a consensus and agree upon, and this is different, obviously, to our current monetary system, where you know the rules of the game are coordinated by small committees of extremely powerful bankers. We do not see inside of their meetings. We do not have a say. We do not have a vote for whether they're going to raise interest rates now or then or whatever. It's we accept obvious central planning when in something as intimate as money, and it just seems obvious to me, at least, that a more ethical form of money would operate on honest and transparent rules than insiders. And as a second point, and this relates particularly to how is the money produced? How does it come into existence? Does it require much energy to produce? Particularly in the case of dollars and pounds and stuff like that, which can be electronically created at will by simple ledger entries. There's no energy involved in that. There's no work. It is, it's as simple as printing it out of thin air, essentially. And this is different to to Bitcoin, obviously. And this is often a very basic confusion that I find, particularly when people express concerns regarding the energy use of Bitcoin, but they don't really understand that the tether to energy, or the tether to computational work, is a intrinsic aspect of how the proof of work mechanism operates in order to create in order to create bitcoins and to create them into existence. Proof of work is a sort of a protocol that is involved in the verification of blocks. When miners are collecting transactions into a block and competing with other miners to solve this mathematical problem, which is it's arbitrary in a certain way, but people confuse that for being wasted. But it's just a sort of a mathematical way of creating something that is hard to fake, and I mean I don't know how to. It's difficult to explain it in such a way that doesn't get too technical, because I don't want this to get too technical into how the SHA-256 algorithm works. How do miners sort of use this trial and error method in order to reach a certain target value, and when they have reach that target value, which requires a certain amount of computational work to be done, which is the proof of work. They're doing this proof of work in order to get the block reward, which is how bitcoins come into existence. And whilst the people who don't really understand how Bitcoin works, they'll say, well, this is an arbitrary mathematical problem. It's kind of besides the point. I think you should think of it in this way: is that the creation of new bitcoins is intrinsically tied to a certain amount of work that is done. So it's tied to energy in a very deep, fundamental way. So if any, in another respect, you could think of a Bitcoin as essentially a representation of energy, as a representation of work done, which is why you cannot create new Bitcoins without doing that proof of work, without expending that energy expenditure. And but yeah, I mean, as I sort of learn more, particularly I want to learn more about the technical details, so that I can sort of communicate, more and more details of the how it works. So I think a central barrier I find to Bitcoin adoption is the barrier of education, and because I'm disappointed with how how much fear, uncertainty, and doubt is sort of conjured up, mostly by sort of slightly deceptive media articles, and then these sort of propagate these sorts of misconceptions regarding how it works, which many people just assume to be the case. They'll just take on these sort of negative biases, and without really, and it stops them from really assessing, what is the monetary system I'm in right now? Is this good? Should I stay within this monetary system? But I think as people as inflation becomes more and more obvious, people start asking questions. But yeah, that's been good. Enjoy the rest of your day.